So the single idea of this entire talk this hour hinges on the idea that for B2B, ICP aligned attention is the most valuable raw commodity on the internet, right? It is it's essentially oil, right? And it's not just attention in general, right? Because 11 million views from people who are not going to buy from you is you're entertaining them, right? But attention from the people who sign contracts with your agency, that is the most valuable raw commodity on the internet, their attention, right? And it exists in only one place on the internet, if we're really being honest, right? On X, your buyer is usually an anonymous handle and they're arguing about politics, or they're one person who's maybe a business owner in a very diffuse world of memes and politics and sports and everything else under the sun. Right? It's like a town square, right? On Instagram, people are basically on vacation or they're trying to entertain each other or they're thirst traps, right? On TikTok, they're either escaping work entirely or they're buying skincare and clothing. They're there for B2C things, right? But LinkedIn is the only platform on the internet where everyone shows up de-anonymized with their real names, their real identities, their job titles, and they're attached to their company. And they're there with the explicit intent of doing business. There is literally nowhere else on the internet that is like that, right? So it makes every reaction, every follow, every profile view, every connection something that exists nowhere else on the internet, which is honestly a business intent signal with a name, a real name that is verified, and a job title attached to that name, right? And most of you, right, given what your niches likely are in the agency world, are standing on what could be a trillion-gallon oil field of those attention signals. Because your buyers are there daily, they're reading, they're reacting, they're lurking, right? So raw attention, if ICP aligned, can also be wasted, right? And it can become worthless. It has to be what I call, and using this analogy, drilled, refined, and delivered. And the system and machinery to do that at scale for LinkedIn hasn't really existed until recently, right? And it exists now. I know I've built it. Other people are doing their own way of doing this, but I built it end to end, and I call the discipline full stack ghostwriting or pipeline engineering. You can go with either one. I prefer full stack ghostwriting because I think it touches more key tenets. But it runs on three engines, right? We have the drill. So we have content that's engineered to create gravity that pulls your buyers to you, right? And what that gravity attracts becomes your oil, right? Then we have the refinery, which captures and qualifies every single signal and sends connection requests around the clock, right, to qualified prospects, right? Is the end we're lead scoring these people, of course. And then we have the pipeline, which is my SDRs and what I call my co-pilot, which you're going to see, converting it into book calls on your calendar, right? So just about me really quick, credentials and kind of like one breath. So I'm a full stack LinkedIn ghostwriter. I write content and I built the system that you're going to see today that turns that attention into book calls. I've been doing this for 7 years. I work exclusively with people in B2B running sales-led motions. I've generated $10 million in client ARR and 1.5 billion ICP aligned impressions in the last 24 months alone. And everything that you're going to see today comes from real clients, current clients, and their accounts, which I've received their permission to share, right? This system wasn't designed like in a vacuum or on a whiteboard or hypothetically. It all exists because I watch my client's pipeline die somewhere specific. And over the last 7 years, I built the pieces that make that death impossible, right? So let's call this like corpse number one, right? This is attention, right? And so when I started in 2019, I made my clients, B2B founders, famous to their ICP, and I figured out a way to do that really well on LinkedIn. Right. And for a few years, I watched what happened next, which is my roster bifurcated or split in two, right? I would build this attention and then I'd advise them on how to harness that attention, right? And the clients who built what I advised, that attention became revenue, right? But a lot of them never built it. And so that oil of raw ICP aligned attention became a tar pit, right? And even for the ones who did harvest it, I was advising them once they harvested it and how to harvest it, but I wasn't operating it for them. So I ultimately couldn't control that downstream outcome of that attention I was creating, right? So the attention was never the problem, right? And you can see here, these people look kind of identical, right? They're both selling to B2B. One is selling to customer success, one is selling to HR people, and they're getting a lot of ICP aligned attention, right? But so the attention wasn't the problem, it was the harvesting of the attention. And the reality is, like, my advice alone wasn't going to harvest that attention for these people. Right. So I started to take the reins myself, and I started with an experiment on one client's engagement, and I processed it by hand. Okay, who liked this? Okay, what was the ICP for this founder? For this specific founder where I did this, it was like, okay, they're looking for people who are doing 30 million ARR, less than 100 people headcount, right? ICP aligned. Is this person in alignment? They're a founder of one of these companies. Okay, ICP aligned, click, connect. All right, let me open the conversation now, right? And two things got obvious really fast when I started doing this manually. The conversations that did convert had way more energy behind them because these people had come to us, right? So their likes, their follows, their profile views were all intent signals. They were all hands like going up in a stadium, because when you have, 500,000 likes on a post, that's a couple stadiums worth of people, right? And everybody also saw the amount of likes that post did. So the authority was built there, right? But the second part of it, right? So when the conversation did convert, great. I mean, these were the warmest leads on earth, right? And the deals closed very quickly. But the second thing I noticed is what I was fumbling, right? Because it turns out that DMing people is its own discipline, right? And I went and learned that discipline, and I spent way more money than I care to admit to learn that discipline. And we'll hold that thought, because we're going to get to that in a little bit, and I'll show you what it became, right? And it's not a script, it's not frameworks, it's not any of this stuff, right? It's not like you can plug and play a cold email script. It's not like that, right? But the scale problem is what remained here, because no human can manually harvest a stadium worth of attention, right? So a couple more years of engineering later, and the refinery is what you're going to see next, right? So if we look at, these inboxes, right? Once the refinery works, which is harvesting all of that attention, right? The machine harvests, scores, opens the door, right? And your SDR had to walk the last 10 feet. That was my model for the last let's say 4 years. 2 of those years, that was my model, right? And what happened? I watched qualified conversations that had been kicked off, right? Which is one of the hardest assets in B2B to manufacture, just completely like rot in people's inboxes, right? The founders were either too busy, they didn't have an SDR, their SDR was trained poorly, or, it was like a cold email SDR pitch slapping a warm, intent signal, right? So refined fuel delivered to a gas station, right, with nobody behind the counter to get it, right? So over the last 24 and really 18 months is where the rubber has met the road on this. I decided to absorb the last 10 feet, and I started bringing in my own SDRs in-house. I codified my DM approach into an instrument they run. And since then, the machine doesn't end at client inboxes. And I've since onboarded my entire client roster onto this motion, right? And now it ends at their calendar, right? It ends with that sales call. They show up, they show up to booked calls, right? And the decision is that this whole thesis is, when I run the entire train from drill to book call, I can guarantee the outcome, and I can make results wildly asymmetrical to what my clients are paying me, right? So nothing in this offer is brainstormed. None of it is theoretical. All of it has been stress tested by reality, and every layer was built because I saw a failure point that needed to be fixed, right? So let's talk about, this idea of the drill, right? So ICP fame is not like a lottery. You don't get lucky. You don't just go viral and get lucky. Like, it can be completely engineered, right? So let's start with like one sort of misconception that I want to dispel. Followers and impressions matter enormously. And anyone who calls them vanity metrics has never been famous to their exact buyers, and they've never felt what it does, right? They never had inbound DMs. They never had deals arriving pre-sold. They never had the pricing power that comes with it. And they never had the aura that it affords you when you're doing outbound, Okay. So ICP fame is actually the single highest leverage asset in B2B, and it's the single hardest one to build, and it takes the longest, which is why premium ghostwriting is the foundation of everything my team runs, right? And what I do. Now, the second half of that truth, which nobody selling LinkedIn services is going to tell you, is this is a very long tail asset. Think of it like SEO, right? Yes, spikes will happen. I've had clients go from 0 to 5,000 followers in 2 weeks. That's happened. I'll show you receipts. You'll see them soon. I've had one account do over 1.5 million impressions in their first week. Damiano, you know him, Tim, right? Incredible, completely not predictable. And the reality is it takes 6 to 12 months before an account really pops off, right? Some take 2 years to get to 10,000 followers, but they still print money off of that audience because it's ICP aligned. But the idea is this is not like a light switch you just turn on. You engineer this and it compounds over time, right? But this is why this system and this machine I built runs on 2 clocks, right? The drill, the content is the long clock, but the pipeline is the short one. And the pipeline can fill from day one, and it doesn't wait on your content to take off, but your content makes it stronger. And as your content grows, it becomes exponentially more powerful, right? So hold that thought about, this is architecture of the whole offer. But so this is why the machine runs on 2 clocks, right? So the drill is the long clock and the pipeline is the short one, right? And so the pipeline fills from day one. It doesn't wait on for your content to take off. So let's take a look here. So we're going to talk about content for a second here, right? So every post is one of 3 levels, and each level speaks to a different level of intent, right? Level 1 is distribution. Those are the hot takes, the war stories, the personal stories and moments of failure that you might experience, right, in your career. And current events are good too. They can be an accelerant, but they're not sort of core, right? And this level 1 content is engineered for reach and distribution. And the idea is to pull as many people into your gravity as possible who are ICP adjacent, right? That is drilling. If you don't have level 1 content, you have no field to drill. Level 2 is what I call ICP pain. This is their problems explained in a way that they can, if you're doing it right, you're explaining their problems better than they would explain themselves, right? It's the things they experience in their day-to-day life and their career. And this is what turns a stranger or somebody who came in from your distribution content into someone who says, oh, this person gets me, which is very powerful, right? And then level 3, we have credibility content. These are the proof, the case studies, the social credibility. This is a different signal, and this gets the least amount of distribution. But as you have people in your gravity, we do more level 3 content to build that credibility over time, right? And so a well-rounded strategy talks to every level of intent at once, right? So the engineering ratio is 70-30 towards level 1 to start while we're drilling. And then we shift down as we begin to harvest, right? And we begin to do more level 2 and level 3 content. But so many founders run it completely backwards. They start with case studies. They try and broadcast that to 100 followers. And then they say LinkedIn doesn't work, but they never built a field that they could drill, right? So the strategy of what to post and in what ratio is there, right? But now let's zoom into like what a single post would do. Because whether it actually compels the click and gets that connection and gets that attention comes down to a couple things. So one are the triggers. And these are the things that hold human attention, right? So in any medium, whether it's films, novels, your feed, whatever, you have 5 to 6 neurological triggers: status anxiety, threat of loss of control, tribalism, moral outrage, and curiosity gaps. And the best content, the best posts are going to layer several of these at once, right? And then you have the hook, right? So the first 3 lines is what is going to decide everything. And I score every hook on 3 levers, right? Number density, credibility signaling, and polarization. And if we're rating each one of those layers on a score of 1 to 10, I want an aggregate score of 25 out of 30, or it doesn't shit, right? Because a hook that everyone's going to agree with and doesn't do these things is a hook that nobody's going to click on. So as you can see here, there's my client, Alex. What do we have here? Number density, 180K, 200K, 2 million, right? What do we have here? Credibility signaling, right? He spent all this money and his business almost failed, but he's still here. He's doing $5 million a year now. And he came out the other side being able to spend $2 million and come out the other side of it. There's a strong signal of credibility there. And then there's polarization. Look at this money I spent on all the people you think you need to hire, and it was a waste of money, right? That's what he's implicitly saying in this hook, right? And so who engaged with this is ICP, founders who are doing $30 million or less a year with headcounts of like 50 to 100 people, right? So I'm going to show you just real quick, and this is meant to just be like a deluge, right? But it's just like a wall of what I'm calling wells, right? Wells that gush oil of attention, right? So here's what, when you engineer content this way, this is what it produces, right? Now, these are all client receipts. These are people who run this system every day, 5 days a week, right? And these are the results. And, some of these are spikes. Like you're seeing people spike very quickly, but, like this is a big spike. But a lot of this is long tail stuff, right? This is that gentleman, Tim, I mentioned earlier. This is a guy who did 1.5 million impressions in about a week and a half. That's very unusual, right? So this is what it looks like when we run the machine correctly, right? And here's just two posts to just kind of bring that home. We just saw this one from Alex. The next day, he did another one. Right? And what do we see here again? We see number density, 15 million, 500K, right? We see credibility signaling. I sold my company for $15 million, but I only got 500 grand. And there's the polarization. I only took home 500K. What does that have in it? That has status anxiety. That has the threat. That has loss of control, right? There's an element of moral outrage here. Like, wait, you sold your company for $15 million, only got 500 grand. A lot of neurological triggers in this one, right? So that's what the well looks like, right? But what about the well head, right? And that is the profile, right? So this is the thing that so many people skip, but the profile it's the wellhead of all of this. Everyone that your content pulls in clicks your name, or eventually they do. And in that moment, they want one thing. They want to understand instantly what's in it for them, the outcome you deliver, and the problem you solve. Right? And it's the problem that needs to keep them up at night. And they need to know that in 5 seconds, or else you're letting that oil, again, just leak back into the ground, right? And so I rebuild this for every client. So with Alex, when we got started, he wanted to be the bootstrap guy. But then he realized like, oh crap, we're launching a new product. We need to start selling the product. All right. So this one obviously did pretty good for him, right? 5 million impressions in the trailing 30 days off of this profile. But today, in January, we changed it, right? And we changed it to what his offer is now, which is his new help desk software. And I thought this was so funny, so I included it. I literally went and took this screenshot yesterday, and there was literally this message popped up, said, hey, Alex, I've been a Zendesk client for 10 years with 6-figure contract. I'm happy to kill it and go with your platform. Can you text me? Like, I was just like, this is like, this is perfect, right? So before and after profile, right? This is him building attention, and this is him in January this year where he said, guys, Julian, I got to launch my product now. Okay, my old product, I'm sunsetting it. It did great, 5 million ARR for me. This is my new product now, and we have 0 users. We got to go. And so, again, people need to come in 5 seconds, know how you solve their problem, and the outcome you're going to get them. So we've just been seeing Alex, but now I kind of want to formally introduce him a little bit. Right. So the calendar you saw at the top of this call from March is his calendar. Right. So this is Alex's timeline working with me. In 18 months, we went from 0 to 64,000 followers, which is pretty parabolic. But again, he didn't start getting traction really until month 10. Today, he's at 64,000. He's one of the most recognized names in his niche. He's done 32 million impressions over the last year. And we just took his new company, Helply, from 0 to $1 million ARR in 7 months. And LinkedIn was the only channel that we used to do that, right? And you don't have to take that on faith, right? He announced it, and you can see what we see here, right? We have some of the the triggers of our hooks here as well, right? It answered a question I was afraid to ask for 14 years, $1 million ARR. Here's my screenshot. Credibility, right? Polarization, right? It's a complicated feeling, right? Credibility, number density, right? So this is what this system created for him in 7 months, right? And it's funny because this is like the content system I was telling you about, kind of like broadcasting the results it produced. So it's kind of funny. But that is what we created, right? So I want to take you guys into what I call the warmth ladder, because now this is what builds upon how Alex was able to achieve these results, right? Because here's where everything that probably you might think about content maybe stops a little bit short. Because the point, yes, impressions are important, but the most important thing are the intent signals, right? Because there's a ladder of warmth, and every rung on that ladder is a hand going up, whether that's engaged with the post, right? Followed or connected, right? Viewed your profile, right? These are genuinely really good signals that are sitting uncollected in your account right now, right? And then those are the warmest. Now it starts to get a little colder, but still good. They engage with your competitor content, right? And then you have the bottom, but still works, which is keyword search for your ICP if they're active on LinkedIn. Have they been active in the last month? If yes, all right, there you go. That's another signal, right? Content lets you live at the top of this ladder while your market is really going to be fighting. Like your competitors are fighting over the bottom of this ladder. They're doing ICP keyword search and they're just pitch slapping people with the worst outbound you've ever seen in your life. And if you're on LinkedIn and you're in your DMs, you've seen that, right? It is pretty bad out there right now. So, Alex generated 32 million impressions in a year. And out of that, he generated 236,000 engagements. And about 57% of that was from his ICP directly, like direct buyers of his help desk product. So that's a couple stadiums worth of people raising their hands. And again, so what human can actually process that, let alone several stadiums worth, right? And that's nobody. Nobody can do that. And that's the refinery's job, right? So now we're getting into the second piece of this system. So we talk about content, we talk about attention. Now we're going to talk about refining, right? And I'm going to kind of open this for you screen by screen with one client in particular. Right. So I want you guys to meet Justin. So you're going to see him in a second, but Justin is a different role from Alex. He is selling business intelligence tools to companies. His ideal companies are Fortune 1000 companies. Think Accenture, right? Think Air France, right? And this machine that we're going to walk through now books him about 8 calls per week. And he routinely closes 25K to 150K deals, right? Completely on LinkedIn. And his ICP are the CX and customer success leadership at these companies. So VPs, directors, heads of CX, and the CIOs, the people who are in charge of the data, right? And so one thing you'll see is that this machine works in autonomous runs. So around the clock, it's always coming and it is checking to make sure, hey, do we have leads? Do we have more engagement signals, right? So let's take a look at Justin here, right? So this was a post that we did last month. It did 195,000 impressions. It did 647 reactions, 55 comments, and 21 reposts. So again, we have 2 stadiums worth of people basically raising their hand, or maybe a stadium. We'll call it a stadium worth of people, right? So now let's watch the machine deal with this, right? So I feed it in, the machine feeds in autonomously, right? And it comes with a message, part of the cron job, right? And its job is to keep the lead pool full. So here's the run. You can look at it at the top. It worked for 7 minutes and 42 seconds on its own. And then it reported back when it was done, while we were all doing something else entirely. And so we did the harvest, 1 post, 567 people collected. And we ran them through these gates here. These are the scoring gates for Justin. We can do up to 25 scoring gates, right? But he wanted to make sure that we're excluding anyone who's non-enterprise. We're excluding anyone who has a product role. They have to have some sort of CX or CS leadership or data leadership. We're excluding competitors and vendors. And we want to make sure that these people are working at companies that, that have BPOs, that have large customer support systems, have call centers, right? So this is the output of that machine. It scraped the post and it said done, right? So when it looks at it, it says, okay, we had 201 new leads here, 181 new leads that passed our criteria out of this 500 plus people. 20 of them were duplicates. And then you can read the machine's last line. There are no message generated. Nothing was approved, nothing scheduled or sent. It's just harvesting scoring and sending the connection request. And then it stops and waits for a human once that connection request is sent to harvest that accepted connection request, right? And on every accepted connection request, my SDR is in Justin's inbox within 24 hours, Monday through Friday. And then what the human sends is what we will call engine 3, right? But this is the handoff, right? And if we zoom in here, this is Justin's inbox in the MCP manager that you're seeing for 2 days, right? This is what he's seeing, right, on his calendar, right? So from score, straight through, this is where we end up, right? And then here's just a look at, how this goes, right? This guy, Jim, is head of CX leader at a company called A Bridge. He said, hey, late notice, but yeah, I'd really like to get that call on the books. Cool, let's do it, right? This is that guy's company. 82,000 followers, 500 employees, enterprise-grade AI healthcare. Boom, perfect, right? So this system is waterfalling all of the time, and it never runs dry. So it's waking up every morning. It's like, who engaged with the post? Let me see. Okay, do we have enough people, right? Yes, cool. No? Let's go to followers. Who's following us now that we're not connected with? Okay, let's go through those. Okay, enough? Not enough? Next one, profile viewers. Who viewed our profile? Let me send connection. Let me lead score those people, send connection requests. Still not enough? I'm going to go back down. Okay, let's see competitors. Who's engaging with their stuff? Let's reach out to those people. Still not enough, which almost never happens, right? ICP keyword search. Let's just find these buyers, right? And this thing wakes up every morning, and this is what it does, right? So this kind of, and it refills daily, right? It's never idle. And so this maybe answers a question that maybe some of you have, which is like, okay, well, what if my content takes months to pop? What if it takes a year for my content to pop? Okay, it probably will, right? 6 to 12 months. It took Justin 4 months. It took Alex 10 months before we had our first post that got 40,000 impressions, right? And that's just the reality. But the waterfall you're seeing here can run on a much shorter clock, and it's running on all of these clocks simultaneously. The longer content clock, and once that's hitting, it crushes. But it can run on shorter clocks as well, right? From week 1, and even on a quiet account from a engagement perspective, my SDRs are working scored competitor and keyword leads, right? So as we produce that oil field, it's working, and I'd like to try and get to closing 2 to 5 book calls a week off of that alone. And then once the content pops, it's an embarrassment of riches, right? And that's where you see people like Justin, who in 2 days, they're booking 12 calls. Or someone like Alex, who in a single week literally had a wall-to-wall calendar, right? So again, equal honesty about what that backstop is, right? The competitor content, the keywords. Cold buckets are everyone's game, okay? It's a commodity, and your whole market is standing elbow to elbow on that commodity, right? So the warm buckets are where the most value are going to happen, right? And only the content drill produces them. But even when you're playing in a crowded field on the other signals, there's a way to do it right that can put you head and shoulders above your competition, right? And then that same system, when it gets to the content engagers, it just goes bananas, right? So yeah, so 35 to 65% of those harvested leads for Justin, by the way, were scored as viable ICP. That's amazing. That's the content working, right? So one more thing about this MCP that's really important, and the MCP, context protocol, it's whatever. It's basically like you give an AI brain like a, exoskeleton so it can go operate LinkedIn. But now the most important thing about that MCP is not its features, because its features aren't remarkable. But LinkedIn will restrict your account at the drop of a hat for anything that smells like a bot. And your account is the atomic unit of this entire thing. So if you lose it, you lose all of it. You lose all of that hard work. You lose that audience, that fame, that oil field, right? So that's why this MCP is browser-based, and why I have a full-time partner and engineer who lives in Palo Alto who is hardening it every single day, right? So we've gone through 2 years of developing this with choke points handled one by one, dozens of fail safes across every client account running this daily, and we have 0 restrictions, right? Since we've rolled it out after, again, very rigorous testing, we have had 0 client restrictions on this MCP. The 2 reasons I'm telling you this is because you need to vet anyone offering you LinkedIn automation, because the fear about restriction is very, very real. And 2, if you're technical, you could attempt to build this, just budget 6 to 12 months, a dedicated engineer, and a real chance that whatever accounts you test this on, you are going to kill, Like they're going to get likely restricted and banned while you're testing all the edge cases, right? And this would all be happening while your competitors are harvesting the field, right, of prospects. And so, yeah, I know exactly what it costs to build this thing because I paid for it, right? So we've talked about the two engines, the drill, the refinery. Now we're going to get to pipeline, which is probably the thing that I think, honestly, most of you guys are probably most interested in. Maybe the content was, but this is probably the next thing, right? And so this is the last engine. This is the payoff, right, so to speak. It's the payoff of the open loop from the first slide I showed you guys, right? So the refinery is like you open the door, and now how do you warm conversations to become book calls, right? And I'm not going to explain it to you guys. I'm just going to show it to you. So this is a real conversation from my own profile, from first message book to book call. And you're going to read it with me. And it's really funny because I've been doing this for 7 years. I almost never write content for my profile. I know it's like the most ridiculous thing ever. It's like practicing medicine on yourself. And I have a lot of clients and I work with them, right? And I learned how to do this writing for clients before writing for myself. But I still go out every couple of weeks and I'll start 10 conversations, right? And I'll book 3 calls. I have a 30% book call rate when I start this conversation. So let's go look at one of them, right? So let's read through it. So this is the guy named Matthew. I blurred out his name out of respect. I wasn't able to ask him. And I was doing a fun little thing here where I was using my client, Alex, who we've mentioned before. Him and I have actually a referral relationship. So if anyone comes to me from him, I give him $500, right? So I said, hey, Matthew, saw you liked a post by my client, Alex, this one, right? Your company, blurred out, looked interesting, so I shot you a connect request. You guys help SMEs with strategic planning and cash flow forecasting, right? All things BI are going crazy on LI right now. I feel like people have really gotten sick of analytics and intelligence tools that don't tell you anything about causality. And then you're in the UK, right? I went to Peter Gabriel's studio in Bath a few years back. Beautiful countryside, loved it there. He responded within 30 minutes. I play guitar. My first album was Peter Gabriel. Bath is gorgeous. Do you play music? I'm in the UK. Wow, okay, cool. We're off to the races, right? That's awesome. I am a guitar player. I wrote music for television as a composer for 10 years and ran a successful boutique agency doing production music. I still do it, but I don't rely on it to put food on the table. Palm Beach is great. I'm in the Gables. If you ever want a little further south, what was your first Peter Gabriel album? I'm pretty sure it was Peter Gabriel, right? The eponymous album. I'm a hobbyist. I love B.B. King, and now I do that, but I learned classical first. And now part of my life is applying that imagination of music and video games to my professional life. I said, that's a hard first album to beat. I'm going to close the rapport thing real quick. B.B. King's awesome. I did the opposite. I started with Zeppelin. I went to counterpoint and classical. The music and game things is really interesting. Does that show up in your work with clients, or is that part of the product? More the product. Corporate software is dull. I agree. Corporate software sucks, right? Who's on it at the moment? Are you live with paying SMEs, or are you still gearing up while the raise comes together? Installing SMEs now, right? We have our first 10 firms. You must be doing something right. How are you finding them? Your network, outbound, what? And is that pace enough for you? Or do you want to take more? We're gearing up to take a lot more. Haha, I like it. How are you going to get them? Right? Same way you got the first 10, something new. And then Matthew writes me a novel. Founder-led is going to get us to the next 100. I know that. We have to switch polarity to it. It's easy. We can plot the course ourselves, etc. The current state, he tells me about his raise. He tells me about go-to-market work and all of these things and the nature of tech, right? So he just gives me a lot to work with here. And my UK background means I'm reticent to blow my trumpet. That's what he's telling me, right? But my Australian and USA background says, make sure people know that this is ChatGPT for commerce. ChatGPT for commerce, that's a great line. Funny timing, by the way. That post where I came across you, Alex, he's a client. I took him from 0 to 64 ICP followers in 18 months, 0 to 1 million AR in 7 months, yada, 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 yada. We did it all off LinkedIn. Similar to you, Alex was a B2B founder with great stories nobody had heard yet. You know what? I'd actually be down to talk sometime, see if I can help you with the make sure people know you part. And that means profile, content, VN, outbound, engine, everything. Already have a couple of ideas. Want to set that up? Yes, please. Do you have time before 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursday? Absolutely. Grab a time here. Excited to talk. He said, great. By the way, what are the fees? I said, good question. Depends, right? We'll see on the call. There's no obligation either way. Terrific. The platform is generally a game changer. Look forward to speaking with you. I said likewise, right? So here's the fun Easter egg about this. Not a single one of those messages is written by me or a human being, right? Every message was drafted by an engine I built. And my SDR, in my case, I was the SDR for this one, ran the board. I copied and pasted. Maybe I punched up a line or two, but I let it breathe. And so what you just read are machine drafted messages for 3 minutes, and more than likely nothing went off in your brain, right? And that's the bar that I want your conversations to run at, right? So this is the gearbox, right? It is what I call the co-pilot, right? And so because you guys are probably thinking, well, what was the SDR looking at while you ran that? What were you looking at while you ran that? So this is what we have, right? This is basically an AI chess co-pilot from an architecture standpoint applied to DM conversations. And I, unfortunately, have spent close to $30,000 learning how to do DMs over the last 2.5 years. It is disgusting, and it is what it is, but I'm very happy with the outcome. So what do you see here? Immediately, it reads the board, right? Warmth, 6 to 10, came from this. We have a bridge, right? We have 2 meters we're running, indirect, right? And it's looking at the board, and then it's going to tell you the move, right? And this is in computer speak. Resonance token, main thing, choice scaffold, MQ, V11 spine to B2 investment observation, closing the sandwich. It yields this. Ha ha ha, true. What's the main thing at the moment? Chrysalis, the dev work, or what? Content's looking solid, by the way, because I pasted his profile in it. It sees his profile. It knows who I'm talking to. It tells you why it made this decision, right? The quip that he gave me was color, cosign it, don't chase it. Scaffold attacks the root box. His sprawl of products leaves wide open and absorbs the skip confirm question. And then it tells us the decision tree of what is likely to happen from this point on. But again, every single message changes the board. It is a state machine. It is like chess. There's no friggin' template. There's no script. You can't run a conversation with a script. It's impossible, right? So, and before anyone asks about this is not for sale, right? There's no login. This is not software you can buy. It exists in only one place, which is my SDR's hands running night finance conversations, right? So I will show you guys what actually is for sale. But, one thing I want to bring up here, right, is this is a game of chess. DMs are a game of chess, and there's 2 constants, indirect, and then there's millions of positions, right? But I think first there's a category order that is what kills most lead gen. And is that people treat LinkedIn DMs like email. And DMing is not email, right? DMing is like a text message, or even closer, more analogous to a conversation. Email is analogous to mail. It's one shot, it's unsolicited, you're slapping people with a pitch, and then they're either going to delete it or your pitch is irresistible enough. They're like, let me entertain, you just sort of encroaching on my personal space, right? A DM with somebody, whether they engage first or they put some other intent signal into the ether, even just being active on LinkedIn in the last 30 days and then being your ICP, again, is enough of an intent signal for us to go after them, right? It's like texting somebody, right? You let it breathe. There might be a reply every day or so. A day of dead air in the middle. That's completely natural. And it's multi-threaded, right? We're talking about Peter Gabriel, his business, Florida, in like the same breaths. That's totally normal when you're texting somebody, as we all know, or if you're in Slack, right? So the requirement isn't necessarily speed, but it is presence. You want someone skilled playing that game on the board every day, Monday through Friday, right? And here's what all of that money that is very painful, again, to say out loud, learning how to do this has taught me. If we're boiling this down to the quintessential elements, we have 2 constants, direct and indirect, right? Every message in the thread you just read is one or the other. Past that, the conversation is a chessboard with millions of positions, and the state changes every time a piece moves, every time a new message comes in. So you can't choreograph it. You can't script it. A script is going to die on contact with a real human, right? So that's why I stopped writing scripts and I built this engine. And it's a state machine built on the architecture of an AI chess copilot, literally, with decision trees, states, evaluation, and then it's loaded with a brain built for one domain, which is B2B sales-led motions on LinkedIn, right? And it reads the whole board with every message and produces the strongest next move. And its approach has generated millions of dollars in closed revenue since I've brought it out, right? You saw Alex, you've seen Justin. I mean, Justin is literally cleaning up every single week on that platform. So is Alex. Justin's actually doing a lot better than Alex, in my opinion, in terms of book calls. But Alex, you can't argue with 1 million ARR in 7 months. So there was a design decision, that really mattered here. And it came from the, chess itself, right? And the reality is that the strongest player in the world isn't a grandmaster or an AI. It's the human with the AI, right? That's like a centaur, right? And what you just read, that engine drafting, me commanding the board, basically copying and pasting for the most part, occasionally stepping in to punch something up, but very rarely, and deciding when to push and to let it breathe, rather than just deluge this guy with follow-ups. That was also the human decision there, right? So about those humans, my SDRs, I call them forward deployed. I hire, train, and manage them. They embed in your pipeline. They're all US based. They're all university educated. And, funny enough, like every one of them, except for one of them, are my high school friends. So, everyone went to university. Everyone just, the job market can be a little tough out there. So I've been able to generate jobs for my friends. So we're not offshoring. We're not a rotating cast of people like reading scripts. These are all really educated, sharp people who I trust, holding a very good machine in their hands. And nothing against offshoring. It's totally cool. I've employed many VAs from across the world, and it's been a really good experience, but that's not what this is, right? So one thing I can give to you, though, that is the only choreographed part of this entire thing, is the opener, right? That's the only thing you can choreograph here. Chess, like chess, you can list out an encyclopedia of every opening gambit, right? But once the game becomes the game after the second move, you can't script anything, right? But going back to the first message you saw, we can break this down. So we have an intro. If it is a warm engagement, we do an acknowledgement of that, which I did here in the second beat. But if it's not warm, you do a restrained compliment. The company looks interesting. You guys help SMEs with strategic planning, restrained compliment. Then I restate his offer at him. Then I do an authority building observation to let him know I'm not a civilian, right? That's all you need to do. It could be one line. It doesn't have to be anything intense. It just has to be crazy how X has changed in Y industry, huh? Right? And then a rapport handoff, which got cut off here, but that's the, the bit about, you're close to Bath in the UK, Peter Gabriel, etc. Right. And what we're doing here is we're opening 3 threads. We're opening a business thread in 2 ways, right? We're asking about what his function is, what the company does, and we're doing authority building observation. So those are 2 threads that he could potentially jump on, and we have a rapport thread, right? So we're opening 3 threads. That is the ultimate goal of this intro, right? If he pulls any one of them, we're in business, right? So that's what we're doing here, right? So you guys can steal this. And you guys can start using this tomorrow, right? But again, this was drafted by the engine, right? But this is the only choreographed part about it. Other than that, once he responds, you are in the wild and you are in a game of chess, and there's no script that's going to help you, right? So that brings us to the part of this that makes most founders most interested. This is fully done for you, right? Messages go out without your approval. You just read, right? Why that's safe, right? You've seen the Copilot in action. And here's why it's necessary. Because to book calls, we have to be in this thing every day on the board. And a live conversation, yes, it can breathe for a day or 2, maybe 3, but you cannot wait on a founder running a company to be a bottleneck on this machine, right? Especially on your busiest weeks. You got to let it roll, right? And what makes every message yours is what I call the offer config. So this is built together at intake. It's your offer, your ICP, your proof, bits of your voice, not too much, but enough. Any red lines, it tells me about who you are. My config knows that I was a composer. It knows I worked with Peter Gabriel. It knows that I produced a gold record for this rapper Denzel Curry back in the day. It knows I lived in Venice Beach. It knows I did a year of school in Chicago, right? It knows all that about me. So it can pull on it as it wants, right? But the offer config is what makes this yours. It cannot talk about anything you didn't load into it. So, and you're never in the dark with this thing, right? I call it like the glass cockpit. Every thread lives in your dashboard, and you have a 20 to 30 minute call once a week with me or my team, and you see everything and you don't have to touch anything, and you're just getting results, right? So this is the shorter clock. While your field compounds, while the content works, this engine is on from day one. It books 2 to 5 qualified calls a week. My goal is 10% of conversations started turn into book calls, right? And when the content starts to work, that easily goes to 5, 10, and beyond, right? And this is not like hope or theory. I'm running this literally with a dozen plus people every day, right? So, you know, that's the dimension of this, right? And one thing that I love to mention is that while content is a 6 to 12 month lab, right? The feedback loop on DMs is much faster, right? Content takes months. Ads can maybe tell you a little bit faster, but that costs you way more money. Direct conversations with your ICP are the fastest, cheapest way to get the truth about your offer in B2B. So I run it like an engineer. You start 20 conversations in 2 days. If 10% are not turned into book calls, the problem is not the outreach, it's the offer, right? So no replies, no book calls, no conversations trending towards a book call in 48 to 72 hours. We're going to know that. And immediately, because everything runs off the config, the fix is fast. We sharpen the offer upstream. We get your profile punched up with that new offer, right? And the new angle is live on your profile and the gambits within 48 hours. And then we do another 20 conversations, right? And so that's the R&D, and that happens in 48 to 72 hour cycles, right? While everyone else waits like 2 quarters to judge the quality of their outbound, or a month, that's BS. That's ridiculous. If you are not booking 10% of calls in 48 hours, your offer is wrong, your profile positioning is wrong, you change it, and it'll click like that. I have a friend who's a client who is brokering deals between landowners and data center buyers at Meta, Microsoft, you name it. First 40 messages, nothing. He was a little apprehensive to let me do what I wanted to do on his profile from day one. We changed his profile. 22 conversations started, 10 book calls in 72 hours. That's the way this works. These are really fast cycles, right? When it comes to DMing, content, much longer, right? That's the reality. You gotta play content for a long time to build a brand. So let me know if you guys got the opening gambit. If anyone wants it or didn't get a chance to grab it, I can share it at the end with Damiano. But yeah, that's yours to keep, right? And it's the only move in the game of DMs that can be written down. Everything else after it is a chessboard with millions of positions, decision trees, and that's why the engine exists. That's why the Copilot exists, right? So we're getting close to the end here. So 3 failure modes, right? So if we step back to the drill, the refinery, the pipeline, I can show you something about your company, right? Every B2B company on this platform on LinkedIn fails at exactly 1 of 3 points or multiple points, right? 1 is you don't have an oil field. You don't post. You have no attention. You have no gravity. Your buyers are here daily and they don't know you exist. 2 is the unharvested field. You get attention and it turns into a tar pit, right? Likes, impressions, but no pipeline, right? And then 3 is dying in the inbox. The signals exist, maybe the conversation exists, but they're crap. Your outbound maybe sucks. Maybe you get someone on the hook, but you don't know where to go next. You're like, oh God, this is a lead. Like, we're talking, what happens, right? So yeah, which one are you? Is it 1, 2, or 3, or is it all of them, or is it 2 of them, right? You can be honest. I don't need to see it, but think about that for yourself, right? So all of these situations are a symptom of the same main disease, which is there's a broken link between attention and revenue, right? And your number 1, 2, 3 is just where you are on this spectrum, right? Cool. So this is what the market offers you if you want to go try and Frankenstein this, right? The market will offer you a ghostwriter. The ghostwriter brings you attention, right? And then walks away from it, right? And that's the failure mode. Number 2, the second failure mode of harvesting that is now on you. And you're spending, on average 3 to 5K a month on a ghostwriter, right? Then you have a lead gen agency, right? Usually cold lists. They don't have the attention creation power of a premium ghostwriter. So you're dealing with cold lists. You have no field. You're just basically a shovel at the most commoditized end, right, of everything, right? Then you have an automation tool because you got to harvest the attention. You got to find the leads. You got to lead score them, etc. And now you hold the ban risk on your account with no operator and potentially no content, right? And finally, you have an SDR who, a really good SDR is 8 to 12K a month fully loaded. You can find SDRs for $1,000 to $2,000 a month. But you're pointing them at cold lists and they have no attention behind them. They don't have that raw commodity and they're fighting for credibility out the gate, right? So you stitch those 4 vendors together, you have 4 invoices, and now you're a general contractor of a machine where none of them can see the whole thing unless you force that. And more than likely, they will not comply. Again, you have 4 different heads all kind of focused on a different goal, right? And those seams are where your pipeline just falls apart, right? So the alternative is what we've just been talking about for the last 50 minutes, right? Which is one team that engineers the whole rig, right? Because I've seen a pipeline fall apart at every seam and I've built over that, right? To make sure it doesn't happen. Okay. So, I think the thing that I've spent the last 7 years getting to are these 4 components, right? The 3 engines we talked about, right? The drill, the refinery, the delivery. And everything else in that is handled, right? So we have the wellhead, which is the profile engineering, right? It's rebuilt so your ideal buyers come and understand instantly what's in it for them, right? And then once it is working, because we'll know because the DMs are converting, we just keep it current, right? Every engager, every cold connection is going to cross this threshold of your profile before coming into your pipeline. Then we have the drill. That's premium ghostwriting. It's written by me. I have 2 other writers, also my buddies, trained them personally, US-based storytellers. Again, went to high school with these guys. No offshoring, no AI content farms, no juniors who are reading prompts on your content to create your content. And the levels, the ratios we talked about earlier, the leads, the scoring on the hooks, all of that is built into the systems that we're trained on, right? And this creates the gravity that the machine feeds on, right? Then we have the signal engine, right? Custom MCP on your account, one standing goal, keep your lead pool full. Engagers, competitor audiences, ICP search, every lead going through up to 25 gates that we determine together. Every pass gets a connection request, up to 800 a month. We can send up to 800 connection requests from an account a month. It is platform safe. It's guarded by an engineer who's my partner. Those are the fail safes. And the pipeline begins filling from day one. And when the content takes off, you have an embarrassment of riches, right? And then finally, we have the 4 deployed SDR with the DM Copilot. I bring the SDR, you don't hire them, you don't train them, you don't manage anyone. And we're on the board doing this within 24 hours of every acceptance, Monday through Friday, running that chess engine end to end. And you have one job. Qualified calls show up in your calendar. You never touch your inbox. You show up to those calls and you close those deals with qualified prospects. That's all you have to do, right? So yeah, everything else is handled fully, operated soup to nuts, right? The operating system around them, the offer config. We do that in weeks 1 or 2. That's the source of truth. The offer, the ICP, the gates, the voice, everything is downstream of that. And that 48-hour loop is what we're testing, and that keeps us honest, right? It's stress testing your offer against ICP conversations until they convert and producing inside 30 days, right? Has it taken 60 before? Yeah, I've had to pivot. I had one client in mind who I had to pivot multiple times. They sell SEO. Eventually, we wake up and it's hitting, right? And they were really apprehensive, by the way, to call out their ICP by name and provide some sort of outcome that they could provide. And that was their stumbling block. We helped them get past it. And now they're on fire, right? In a good way. So yeah, you watch from the glass cockpit, right? Everything else is handled, fully operated, soup to nuts. Your total time costs are you approving the post, and you show up to 1 20 to 30-minute call a week, maybe 45 minutes of your time a week, max. That's the whole job, right? So if we're looking at the targets, just to break them down in one place, we can send 600 to 800 connection requests a month. And those connection requests are scored and ICP qualified before they go out, right? It runs, I'd accept an expectance rate of acceptance rate is a 50 to 70%. I call 35% the floor. If you're below 35%, it's a profile problem, right? And at the floor, that's about 280 to up to 560 new conversations that we can start a month, right? This is all platform safe. That's what it's engineered to protect. Your profile is safe. We put a forward deployed SDR with the chess engine on that volume, and converting even modest single digits, you get 2 to 5 calls a week. And as that begins to scale, as we get to month 3 and beyond, 10 a week is very possible. And as you saw just even with Justin, I mean, we're talking like 11 calls in 2 days. That's when the content was friggin' firing on all cylinders, right? So going back to Justin, one post, 567 engagers, 201 of them were prospects that went through the gates, 181 made into the campaign, right? That's a 35% floor of ICP aligned engagement, right? And so this machine is doing this every day, right? 5 days a week, right? And what's the market rate for a book call in B2B if you're paying per meeting? It's $500 to $1,000 for cold meetings, right? If your first 60 days are doing 2 to 5 a week, right? That's 8 to 20 meetings a month. You tell me what that's worth with your offer. Right? Is that 4 or 20 grand a month? Is it 20K to 40K a month? What is that, right? Think about it, right? No pay-per meeting. There's no vendor on earth that does this for you and leaves you famous and provides for you an asymmetrical outcome like this. But yeah, think about what's your average contact value. That's really the question. You notice I'm not putting a price on the screen. That's deliberate. There's a number that depends on your scope, right? And it's a conversation for people who I can actually help. Some of you, I might not be able to help, right? So we can talk numbers. You know, if it seems like a fit, we can get into numbers. But my core goal with any of you guys who want to talk is, can I help you, right? I need to see. We need to look and see if we can actually make this happen for you, right? But again, what I will show you is Justin in our Slack, completely unprompted, right? 25K ARR signed in 13 days from first name to signature. And that's what closing looks like when buyers arrive knowing who you are, right? He expects 40K inside 6 months. And this machine just keeps booking for him, 8+ calls a week, right? And that one contract that he signed here pays for almost an entire year of my services, right? That's one deal from one conversation. That's the asymmetry that we have here, right? So these are kind of my terms, how I work, right? Because I only win if the machine produces for you, right? So 90-day installation term, month to month. After that, if qualified calls aren't landing by day 60, fire me, fire us. I'll be the one telling you to do it, right? If we've exhausted every pivot and you're not booking calls, I failed you, and you probably need a new offer. Like, you probably need to switch businesses. If you're on LinkedIn and you're running B2B sales led and you're an agency owner, you can clean up, right? There's only a few niches that come to mind where I'm like, ugh, I wouldn't touch those on LinkedIn. And if we get on a call and we talk, I can tell you what those are and we can see if you're in one of them, right? So, you know, I'd ask you to think, you know, from this room, you know, how many companies, you know, this quarter do you need to close to hit your AC to make this meaningful for you, right? Like, what would you be happy with, right? I think that's the big question. Like, is 2 calls a week enough for you? Is 5 calls enough for you? Is 10 calls enough? Is that not enough? Right? Let's talk about it, right? But your content's written by 3 people. I'm one of them. And your conversations are ran by the SDRs that I train personally. So what the next step isn't, it's not a demo. I just show you guys the entire machine, receipt by receipt for the last hour. That was basically a demo. I don't do audits or free reports. There's, you know, you can go and, you know, if you want to trust something to scrape your LinkedIn and tell you how many leads you have, and you can do that for free. That mechanism is not the value, right? The value of that machine is not getting your account banned. The real value is book calls in your calendar, right? So if anyone's interested, you know, I'd recommend a 30-minute fit call with you and I. I need to talk to you. I need to know if I can help you. But here's who this is for: B2B sales-led motions. Whether you're selling business intelligence tools to Fortune 1000 companies like Justin, or you're brokering deals between landowners and data center buyers, or you are an agency owner selling to founders, selling to marketing directors, etc., right? If you're running an agency or coaching offer, if humans close your deals, there's a good chance that I can get you the results that you've seen today, right? And if there are situations where I can't, I'm going to be completely upfront about that on the intro call, because I am not here to go scorched earth and just sign a bunch of clients. We keep our shop pretty tight. I only take people I know I can help, right, and get results for, because that's the whole game. That's why my guarantee exists, and that's why I usually end up working with my clients for multiple years at a time, right? I have clients that I've been working with for 7 years who have been with me on this entire journey, like from year one. So on that call, I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to find your ICP, your offer, your motion, and we both leave knowing which failure mode you're at and whether this system and this machine can fix that for you, right? And if it fits and the slots are open, I'll walk you through installation and the numbers. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, I'll tell you and point you somewhere else better if I can.